Hi, sports fans. Today's t-shirt is... I'm trying to think, but nothing happens. In a couple of weeks, my new book, Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen, will be out in bookstores everywhere and in your mailbox if you pre-ordered it from online. So one of the things we usually do when a new book comes out is a little sort of self-Q&A that I concoct with my publicist at New World Library. We make some questions and then I answer them myself. And for the last couple of books, we've been doing a video version of this, but I haven't shared this with the public. But now that I have this video channel, I thought maybe you folks could be interested too. So let's go to the Q&A. The title of the book is pretty straightforward, but can you explain what this book is? The book is called Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen, and that's pretty much what it is. It is a series of letters written to my dead friend about Zen. In the year 2014, I was on tour in Europe. It's something I do every year since 2009. I have written a lot of books about Zen, starting with Hardcore Zen in 2004 and Sit Down and Shut Up, Don't Be a Jerk, It Came from Beyond Zen, Sex, Sin, and Zen, There Is No God and He Is Always With You, and Zen Wrapped in Karma Dipped in Chocolate. I think that's all of them. And I get invited to do lectures and lead Zen retreats and do all sorts of other interesting stuff in Europe every year. And I was on this tour in 2014, but what made this tour different is that this time 2 friends of mine back home in America were dying of cancer. And I framed the book as a series of letters written to a kind of a composite of these 2 people as I am touring through Europe. So each letter comes from a different city. I think there's a few that where 2 letters in a row come from the same city. And I also incorporated real things that actually happened to me on tours. A lot of funny things, or sometimes they're funny in retrospect and not so funny when they're actually happening. I used a lot of these real events in the book and kind of made it into a story almost like a novel. So it doesn't read so much like your ordinary kind of non-fiction book about Zen or a philosophical sort of book about Zen, but reads as a kind of a narrative of me traveling through Europe as my friend has just died and saying all the things I wish I'd said about Zen to him. The next question is, who was the real Marquis Moon? Marquis Moon is the fake name I gave to the composite character I put together from these 2 friends of mine and also some other people I knew. The real Marquis Moon is actually Mark Smith, my friend Mark Smith, and he's still alive. He kindly allowed me to use his punk rock name and some of the details of his actual life in the book because I didn't want to make it directly to one of the actual 2 people who had died, because there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into using a real person in a book, and I thought it was better to make a composite person. But the real Marquis Moon, or the people on whom Marquis Moon was based, one was the drummer in the first ever punk rock band I ever formed in high school called Max, and the other was the singer in another band who I was good friends with, and I'd also known him like the first one since high school. And we had shared a house together, a sort of punk rock house where a bunch of bands lived together. Not every member of the band, but certain members of, I think, 3 or 4 bands lived together in this house and shared the rent. And it was cheap and it was crummy, but, you could live there. And that's who Marquis Moon was. Next question is, what kind of a relationship did you have with the real Marquis Moon? Well, like I said, it's a composite of 2 different people, but one of them, the main person who I sort of thought of the most while I was writing the book, was a pretty close friend, and we had shared a lot together. We'd played gigs together, we'd done all sorts of things, gone through breakups and stuff together and commiserated about that. And when he was dying, I went 2 times to visit him for a week at a time. And we spent that time mostly just sitting on his couch watching television, and because he wasn't really able to go out that much, although we did a little bit. And it really tore me up when he died. And he was one of the closest people I've ever known who died. I wrote another book called Zen Wrapped in Karma, Dipped in Chocolate about when my mother died, and that was also a pretty big deal. But this was somebody who was roughly my age. He was actually 2 years younger than me. Both of them were the same age. And, you can see a lot of yourself in that. You think, oh my God, that could be me. So that was my relationship with the real Marquis Moon. Another aspect of my relationship with the real Marquis Moon was that the real Marquis Moon was not interested in Zen, not interested in meditation, not interested in religion at all. I mean, he had a kind of, both of them, I would say, had a kind of desire to understand the deeper truths of life and to try to figure it out. But Zen wouldn't have been a path either of them would have chosen. And in fact, it wouldn't have been a path that I would have chosen if I had gone to it the usual way. For example, if I'd wandered into one of these big centers in America like San Francisco Zen Center or Brooklyn Zen Center or Upaya Zen Center or some of these giant places that exist in America these days, and if I'd seen those golden statues and smelled the incense and looked at the flowers and seen the guys with the shaved heads and the robes and all that stuff, I probably would have gone for the hour-long intro class and been like, bye, see ya, I'll talk to you later. But that isn't how I got introduced to it. I got introduced to it by a foul-mouthed, strange guy named Tim McCarthy, who was a hilarious, funny guy and a really warm, caring person. And because I had that connection with him, that's what drew me into Zen. So I understand why people would be reluctant to get into something like Zen, and I want to try to present it in a different way so that maybe the people who normally wouldn't be interested in it might get interested in it. Next question is, why did you frame the book as a series of letters to your friend Marquis? I had originally proposed a book called Zen 101 to New World Library, and they liked the idea, and it was going to be a very basic sort of book about Zen right from the beginning, all the foundational stuff. Because the previous 2 books I'd done, which were Don't Be a Jerk and It Came From Beyond Zen, were very deep dives into the philosophy of Dogen, the medieval Zen teacher from Japan who forms this kind of basis of most of the sort of Zen that I studied and practiced. I found myself going around to places where they'd ask me to come and give lectures and things, and here I am standing up on a stage or somewhere, sometimes in a bar, or I talk in a lot of strange places, and I'm talking about the deep philosophy of Dogen to people who probably don't even know who Buddha was. So I wanted to kind of scale back a little bit and talk about the basics. But when I was writing this book, it was boring to me. I just couldn't get through it. I was sitting at a desk trying to type this stuff, and I'm just going blah, 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 Four Noble Truths, blah, 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 Eightfold Path, all this sort of elementary Buddhist stuff. Then, as a way to try to kind of knock some inspiration into my head, I started looking at these old diaries I kept. I keep a diary when I'm traveling and, write down the things that happen each day, just because sometimes it works out to be good stuff that I can use in a book later on. And I was looking at this, and I found the diary entry I'd written from Hamburg, Germany, on the day that one of my friends actually died, when I first got the news. And I didn't really mean it as such, but the diary entry was written almost like a letter, like I was addressing him and telling him, oh, I'm so sorry, I feel, bad that you're dead, and so forth. And I thought, well, what if I do the whole book like this? What if I just say all of the things I wish I would have been able to say to these friends of mine about Zen, and take all the stuff that I'd written for Zen 101 and reframe it that way, And when I did it that way, the project suddenly had a life to it, because I was no longer addressing a sort of faceless, generic person, but I was addressing an actual person who I really knew in actual life, about something that was much more urgent than the original Zen 101 premise had been. Because I got into Zen not because, I think I'll be interested in Zen. It's because some really heavy things were happening in my life. My mother had been diagnosed with this genetic disorder that not only was she going to die from, but it was possible that I could inherit it. So I learned this shocking news when I was 16 or 17 years old. And when I got to be about 19 or 20 is when I encountered Zen. So all of this stuff was going on in my mind. So it was urgent stuff. And that kind of urgency came back into the project when I made it a series of letters to my dead friend. Next question. You said you never told your friend about your Zen practice. Why not? Well, when he was dying, when I was spending 2 different weeks with him while he was dying and knew he was going to be on his way out pretty soon, I thought, well, if I'm dying, I don't want somebody to come into my house and tell me about their religion and try to convert me at the deathbed conversion. That's not a nice thing to do to somebody. So I just wanted to be real with him. And the reason I'd never talked to him about it before that was, it just wasn't our relationship. That isn't what we bonded on. That isn't what we had in common with each other. What we had in common with each other was a love of bad science fiction movies, a love of punk rock music, and things like that. And that's what we bonded over. So there are some people you can talk to about certain things, and there's some people that it just doesn't work. Yet I felt like both of these people that I was thinking of when I wrote the book, I had a kind of curiosity about these things. And I thought, well, maybe there's a lot of people like that who are interested in the deeper meanings of life, who might be able to benefit from some of the things Zen philosophy and Zen practice has to offer, but who'll never get it if it's just presented the way it usually is presented, in this sort of flowery fashion, in the sort of books that you ordinarily get about Zen. So I thought, well, let me see if I can reach people like that. So there you go. There's my little self Q&A for the book Letters to a Dead Friend About Zen. I hope you enjoyed it and got something out of it, and that you'll buy the book, because, that's how I make my living. Actually, I don't make a good living just on book royalties. That's why I always mention at the end of these videos that I have a Patreon account and I have a PayPal account, both of which you can donate to if you want to support my ongoing work and help me buy bread and cereal and things. So thanks a lot for those contributions, and the book will be out very soon in your stores, so I hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.